Hello, guys. Sorry about that. Major PC malfunction there. Computer just didn't like Shaun in the end, so it cut him off for a while. I'm not surprised. He was getting on my nerves anyway. For the short period he was trying to get a connection. But here we're back on again. Hopefully Shaun will be joining us in just a second, if we can get him back on. So with a little bit of luck, here we go. Shaun, how you doing?
Are we on?
We're on. We're live.
Fantastic.
All I had to do was switch the damn thing on and off again. I was blaming you because
if only that worked. If only that worked with people.
You know?
If only we could switch people off and on again.
I don't understand what's going on here. I mean, look, you've been pestering me for weeks and to come on here and give me a hard time. You know, ringing me up in the middle of the night and when am I on? When am I on? You know, when am I coming on? You know, I mean, look, listen. I know you're up there. You're up there. You know, you're at the top, but doesn't mean to say you're any better than anybody else. You know.
Listen, I've just been going out of my mind in lockdown. That's all it is. I've got nothing else to do. Nothing else to do but pester you.
Well, why did you wake me up at 2 o'clock in the morning? You know. Anyway,
I mean, who's asleep? No one sleeps. No one sleeps at night anymore.
It's okay. If you feel the need to talk and you want to talk to me, that's okay. That's all right. It's not a problem. It's all right. Anyway, look, it's good to have you here, mate.
Great to be with you.
I'll tell you what, I'm glad. I was getting worried about my technology problems here. You know, I thought I was well. I've got a studio here. I've got a new computer, TV. You know, unfortunately, I've just got you. You know, but that's all right. It's okay. Anyway, look, we're not going to worry about that. Okay, it's good to have you on. Lots to talk about. I've got questions here. You know, I'm going to try, guys. I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet because Shaun's got a couple of young kids, and you know, he's driving them mad. You know, but that's okay. You know, he's coming on for a little while to talk about himself, but that's all right. Right, look, Shaun. Look, listen. I've had a little look at your career, okay? And I've had a look at you. The first thing I look at when I look at a player who's at the top end, and you are at the top end, I mean, you know, you're not very exciting, but you're up there, you know. And I look at your timeline, and I have a look at your timeline, you know, and you turned professional at the age of 15.
Yeah.
And, you know, okay, like a lot of players who have reached the top, it took you a wee bit of time to get flowing. You sort of, you came in 98, and it took you about 6 years maybe to get rolling. But when you did, even at the age of 21, you found yourself in the top 16, and you've pretty much been there ever since. Now, a lot of the boys I've been speaking to over the last few weeks, you know, have taken them like a decade to maybe even just get in the top 32 and then come out again. But you've obviously came to the top, you know. But, you know, pretty much got in there straight away and got straight in. And that's why you are where you are. You wouldn't have got there if you hadn't had the ability to do that. But the other interesting thing about you is very interesting to players like Alex Higgins and other players where you know, 2005, you know, World Championships final. 2009, finalist again. 2015, finalist. But you won the title in 2005. You were so young. Were you overwhelmed? Were you shocked, or what happened? Tell us all about that.
Yeah, I think going back to your point a minute ago about, you know, I got into the top 16 early in my career was just because of the World Championships. You know, you got so many points back then, and of course the rankings were only done once a season. I kind of did it backwards. You know, you're really supposed to get on the tour, establish yourself, maybe win a ranking event here or there, then get to the latter stages in some majors, lift something else, and then maybe, you know, a few years down the line, when, as a favourite, win something like the World Championships. All my friends would tell you that it's not a surprise that I didn't follow that protocol and went about it in a completely different way. It was, you know, completely unexpected. I've told the story a few times how I'd actually given up snooker really a few weeks prior to winning the championships in 05. I just said, that's me done with it. I'd had enough with it. My career was going nowhere. I was ranked, mid-table, not climbing the rankings at all. I had a really bad beat in the qualifiers for the China Open. I had my opponent, snookered with 3 reds left. He fluked to red out the snooker and dished, and that was sent me out. And I said to my coach back then, who's no longer with us, Steve Prest, we were driving home in the car. I said, "That's me done."
Why would you want to say you're done? You're only a wee nipper. For goodness sake, you only just got yourself into the game. You turned pro at 15. How old were you when you were going to give up? What? 17, 18? What? How old were you?
This was in 05. So, this was in sort of February, March 05. I just had no money left. We didn't have really much money as a family. I certainly had no money to speak of. I just sort of lost any enthusiasm for it, belief. And obviously there were economic pressures as well. I was starting to look at reality and go, well, this dream that I've chased from being a child, I left school when I was 13. My family sacrificed a lot financially and, in a lot of other ways. It's time to face up to the reality that it just hasn't worked and I'll have to go and get a job. We tried our best. I'd won the Benson and Hedges Championship at that stage and got to play at Wembley as a wild card. It hadn't been without its, high points to that point, but it was time to face reality. And I went and asked for a job at the local Mercedes garage in Sheffield. And the guy was like, well, when are you available to start? And this, that, and the other. And I told him, and he said, well, go ahead and, finish the season. Why do finish your season and then come back and, we'll talk. And I ended up playing in the World Championships that year purely because I'd already paid my entry fee. That was the only reason I played in it. £750 as it was back then to enter the championships was a lot of money to me. And I didn't have that kind of money to waste. So I played in it out of respect for the money, really, that I'd already spent. And because I'd kind of now got one eye on going off and doing something else, that had probably taken a big weight off. And I went to the qualifiers and played Marcus Campbell and Joe Swale and really played well. But I still obviously went to the Crucible. I didn't know my way around the building, let alone how to play out there in the arena, and I'd never won a match there before. I'd been there twice before. I lost on my debut to Hendry, got absolutely slaughtered. I lost the following year in 03 on a black ball decider to Ken, which was devastating. Didn't qualify in 04. And then in 05, obviously, I went, everyone knows what happened. But to skip forward a few steps, that then obviously gave me so many ranking points that I jumped above quite a lot of players. I think I was ranked 48th at the time when I won.
Right.
And actually winning the championships took me to 21st in the rankings. But by a weird twist of how our system works, I was then installed as number 2 seed at every tournament. And any new events, I was number 1 seed. And I think in terms of rankings, Ian McCulloch suffered very badly because of that, because he was ranked 16th. And I think that type of thing happened to him, well, certainly that year and maybe the following year. And it's obviously no fault of any players. That was how the system was conducted then. The rankings were, they were ridiculous back then, really. But that was the system we played under. And I think if I'd followed the more traditional path of ranking event, do quite well, build your career up, win the Masters or so, and then win the Worlds, my progression through the rankings would have been more traditional. But just sort of jumped straight in there at the last moment. As I say, my career was finished. I'd happily accepted that my life as a snooker player, that I tried my best, given everything I possibly could, slept in the car, horrible B&Bs, it was horrific. And anyone watching, who's had a go, will know what I'm talking about. It was some horrific nights in, the car, sleeping in side streets in Blackpool, all the different qualifying events, just chasing that dream. And I'd kind of accepted that it just hadn't worked. And I think that kind of, it didn't work. We tried our best. I think that. Hello.
Oh,
Who's
that's
that?
I'll just ignore her. She's off for dinner. Why do you have to torture me? I know I'm speaking to Shaun here. Come on, get off the screen. Thank you. Yeah. No. I'll tell you what, I'll sooner take kids any day, Shaun. I really would.
Yeah.
I've got Lady Chanel. Okay. But anyway, look, the thing is with that, I'll tell you what, by the way, Shaun, that's an amazing story. That's an incredible story because and I'm glad you brought it up, because it's not something I would have thought about talking about, because I remember an interview you did in the past that reflected on that. It's over.
Yeah.
It's over. That's it.
Yeah.
Get out. And, and it's incredible. So you go to the World Championship and you win it. You're 22 years old. From there on in, pretty much there on in, you stay in the top 16. I know you dropped down there a bit in the rankings just last season, but I mean, in all honesty, you had a few issues going on at home, and but you soon turned that around. Just before this pandemic started, you actually turned that around, got back on. So you proved the player that you are. But that is a fascinating story, mate. And I hope the guys who are at home actually listening to this never give up. Just don't give up. Would you say that's the case, that maybe a lot of players, perhaps particularly young players, give up too soon? What do you think?
I think there's a lot of players who in snooker, in all sports, I can obviously only speak about snooker, but they never actually get to the bottom of their barrel. They never reach their lowest point. They think they do. And, friends of mine and people who influenced me when I was a kid used to say things like, well, if you want the successes, you've got to be willing to pay the price. And that price, presents itself in many different forms. And as I say, for me, I suppose it was, it wasn't just a monetary price, which was very costly and still is very costly. The expenses of being a full-time professional sports person are significant, as you can imagine. But I suppose, really, if we can park the financial element of it for a minute, which is, it's very hard to, detach the two, but the mental challenge and the emotional challenge was equally as difficult. And then, of course, it's not just you going through that. Your loved ones are going through it. Everyone who's helped you along the way is going through it. It's a damn good thing it worked out.
It did work out. Obviously, it did work. Looking back, so 4 years later, you got to the final again.
Yeah.
How did it feel then?
Yeah, it felt completely differently that year because I was obviously an established player. I'd been to the final before. It has to be said, in 2005, when I walked out in the one table setup for the semis and the final, I just couldn't breathe. Even having played at the Masters in the old Wembley Conference Centre, I just couldn't breathe. So I did well to win in 2005, bearing in mind, like, before the final in 2005, they brought out all the past champions. They all came out for a procession, and you're thinking, geez, like, they're watching backstage. I've just missed this black off the spot, and all this. And so when it came to 2009, like, I'd sort of dropped that, and I'd won a few other tournaments, and that wasn't new anymore. But I just ran into Higgins, who I think we were level pegging after the first session. I think we were 4 frames each after the first session. And then I lost the second session on the Sunday night, I think 7-1, something like that. And that just broke the back of the match. And that's where it was really exposed to me as a person, that my B game, my C game, was just nowhere near. And if I'm honest, it's taken me a long, long time to accept that, but then also go ahead and make changes and try and improve that. I ran into Higgins, and I think I was playing the best snooker of that fortnight in terms of pure break building and scoring and consistency. But I ran into Higgins, who went into it, I think, with the game plan of tying me up. And he knew that his defensive game was way better than mine. And he was right. And he broke the back of the match in the second session. And I was never in the game after that. Never in the game.
It's funny you touched on that thing with Higgins. I think Higgins and Selby and many great players, probably just like yourself, are thinkers. But do you think that that's something that they're aware of? The players know, are very conscious of the fact that they're aware that you're under pressure and they've got you because maybe their safety game and their match play is a lot stronger than yours. Are players at your level aware of
that? Well, I think there's almost a bit of a lie told in snooker. And that is to just play the balls. Just go out and play the table. Forget who you're playing. Just go out and play the table. Play the balls. Doesn't matter. And I think that's true to a certain extent. But then I think the very best players in the world, the legends, the ones we all talk about, they, in my opinion, they do play the player. And they do work out your strengths and weaknesses and tailor their game to it. They don't play the same against everybody. And I think if you watch, I remember Ray Reardon saying to me that when his biggest rival in the 70s was Spencer. And he used to say to me, when I played Spencer in exhibition matches, I never played the same against him as I would in a tournament because I didn't want him to see my real game. I didn't want him to see my moves.
Shaun, I'm not. I mean, could you do that? I mean, do you ban any of that? I'm not.
I mean, yeah. No, I have to say I do because I've watched a lot of snooker, as we all have, and I think the real top players. I'm talking about the class of '92s, the Davises, the Hendrys. Maybe not so much Hendry because he just went for your throat from frame one. Didn't matter who you were, but I think a lot of those players did try and work you out. They did know you were good in that area, so we'll keep him up there. We won't do. And then against somebody else, they might open their shoulders a bit more and go for a few shots and, just try and intimidate somebody. Whereas with other players, they would know they've got to have their guard up a little bit more and play in a slightly more considered way. And I really do think that it's very easy to say, just go out and play the player. Just go out and play the table. Don't get involved. Just play the balls. I'm not too sure that the real best players on the planet now we're talking about actually do that. I think they might sneakily, on the quiet, I think they might be doing something else.
Interesting, very interesting stuff. And then we'll just to extend.
But I have been known to be wrong before, so I'm happy to accept that.
I haven't met a snooker player who's right yet, Shaun. Okay, so
yeah.
2015, you did it again. Here we are, 2005, 22 years old, wins a world championship. 10 years later, third final. Okay, Alex Higgins did it, 72 and 82. Nice little reflection there, by the way, because I know you respect the man. I know you do. And I remember the very nice words you said at his funeral, by the way. I couldn't be there. I was getting beaten up by a bunch of thugs up in Glasgow, but that day I wanted to get to the funeral. But lovely words. You said really, really nice words. So let's go back to 2015.
Well, I think until this season that's just sort of been suspended at the moment, 2014-15 was I think my best season on record. Around that time I was playing some great snooker. Chris Henry and I were working very, very hard, daily. If not together, then remotely, digitally, and stuff like that. We were making some. I think that season or that year, I think I had 3 147s in one calendar year. My game was in really good nick, and I think in the January of 15, I'd won the Masters, and played some of the best snooker of my life. Got to the final the following week of the German Masters, and really was peaking at the World Championships. And I look back at some of the matches I played in that tournament and just think, well, I just went for too many again, but they went in. in that fortnight. They all went in, and I scored heavily. I played with confidence, and found myself, in the final. And I look back at that match and just think, well, we played 33 frames in that match, Stuart and I, and I think there was 30 breaks over 50 or 60 in 33 frames. So there was 30 breaks of over 50 or 60 in 33 frames. The standard of play was incredible. I mean, to be part of it was incredible. But there was a commentator who, I'll have to remain nameless. He came up to me after the match at the after party, where obviously everyone on my team was a little bit downhearted, as you would be, having just lost the world final. He said to me that really, if you just played one or two more safety shots in that match, you might have won that game. And I suppose that speaks to what I was talking about from the start, which is it's taken me so long to learn and accept that side of the game. I was brought up literally to look at these shots and think, well, if you think you can get it, go for it. Because you might not get another chance. That was how I was raised. And it's been very hard for me to unravel that, to reteach myself a different way of playing. And it's something I'm still working on, I'm still trying.
Very, very good. Very, very good.
But I didn't have it. And I certainly would take nothing away from Stuart because, I mean, he beat Robbie Williams in the first round, Graham Dott in the second round, O'Sullivan in the quarters, Judd in the semis, and myself in the final. The players he beat on the way to winning that tournament, he fully deserved it. And the way he played in the final was just fabulous. I thought I remember sitting in my chair in what turned out to be the last two frames, which he won with 2-1 visits. And I remember sitting there thinking, he's bound to realise at some point, he's bound to realise what he's doing here. The pressure of what he's achieved. And it didn't. It certainly didn't seem to. And he made a frame-winning break to get on the hill, as we say. And then in the last frame, I went for another long red, which I missed, left him in the balls, and he won the championship in one visit. And I mean, to stand there and do that is fabulous. So I could never take anything away from him at all.
Look, Stuart did very well. He deserved it, as you said. And he's a great player. He's a great player. Every time I speak to Stuart, he keeps reminding me of that. How good he is. But that's all right. By the way, he was the first one on here. But yeah, he did reflect on that world final against you. And he holds you in high regard. Doesn't think he, didn't slag you off too much. I don't think he did. You're going to watch that interview, actually. You've yet to watch the Stuart Bingham one, haven't you? But, right, we're going to get on to some questions shortly, but I like to sort of delve into you a bit. And
okay.
I think the thing that fascinates me about snooker players, particularly the players that interest me, I keep telling people, Shaun, and I get a little bit bored, watching snooker. I like an attacking player. I like a player that goes for it. And you're one of those players. You're one of the very few players at the top that attacks, and you sort of reflected on changing your game there slightly about 5 minutes ago. I'm not sure it's something that a top player can do. In a lot of respects, I think it would be very, very difficult for a top player to change his game. But in that, when I say that, reflecting on yourself, I mean, change, maybe not taking so many shots on or not being so attacking. You're a very strong player. You're quite entertaining to watch, actually. Unlike Stuart and Davis, I mean, they bore. I'm not even going to go there with Fergal O'Brien. Every time I watch Fergal O'Brien play, I feel like throwing darts at the TV screen. You know what I mean? But, that's okay. So you're a little bit of exciting, Maybe you don't quite have the youth of Trump, or you haven't got the crowd following Ronnie. But you have everything else. You're very tactical. You're very mindful as well, and you like to talk about the game, which is a good thing too. And that puts me on to I like to tie the questions in with this because and this is tough. See, reading questions and talking to you is such a difficult thing to do, So things like your cue action,
Mm.
You have got a great cue action. I call you the master cueman because you do your. I mean,
Not to my face, you don't.
But you get down there with precision. You know, there's very little movement, total focus, and you could say that about the rest of you. I mean, I look at a lot of top end professional players, and you seem to have the demeanor, the temperament, the composure, and you can actually, your temperament is so good, you can probably reconstruct yourself very well when you're under pressure in a match. Now, having said that, you are at the top and you're good. When you're good, you're good. You're very good. But there's days when you're bad and you're awful, and that's a
Yeah.
thing to say about other players. So let's just touch on that for a second. Top players play well, tough to beat, and everybody knows, very intimidating, what have you. But the days when they're really crap, it's not all about why.
You just used the key word, and it's composure. And if you lose your composure out there, you lose everything. If you lose your cool, lose your calm, they're all C words. If you lose them, you literally can't think straight. And if your emotional state controls how you make decisions and what decisions you make, how you feel changes the way you think, and that leads to. I'm not going to go all Yoda on everybody, but that is that's the line. How you feel leads to how you make decisions, and that changes what comes out the other end. So I think we watch the very best. I mean, during lockdown, I've been watching so much YouTube footage from the old days, the 70s, and you watch somebody like a Reardon, just never broke sweat, never looked out of his depth. Obviously got beaten from time. He did lose. He wasn't unbeatable. No one is. But you just never got in his bubble. No one ever got under his skin. If he lost, it was because he played some bad shots, which we all do. But he never lost his composure. And that's the biggest asset of any player. Because everyone can pop balls. Mm-hmm. Everyone can in golf. Everyone can make birdies and hit it 300 yards these days. But can they do it on the Sunday afternoon coming down the stretch? Can they stand there and pop those balls and win that frame now, when it matters now? And there's not many that can. And it is that composure, that ability to literally, these simple cliches of take a deep breath and make good, clear decisions now. That's the difference between the people who lift the trophies and people who don't.
So is that now we focused on those things like composure, temperament, composure, you emphasize composure. Is that put you? Is that the reason why you are where you are? Is that put you where you are?
I think that for me that is the foundation. If you think in terms of building a skyscraper, the composure element has to be at the bottom of it. You have to be able to think clearly under pressure, keep your emotions in check, and make good decisions. That, and people refer to it with different bottle, and all of these things gets thrown around. What it really is composure, being able to think clearly under pressure. It's not the only element. It's not the only, reason or puzzle. It's not the only piece to the puzzle, but it is the most important, in my opinion. And followed again, purely in my opinion, following that very closely is a good technique that stands up under pressure. And I remember saying this to somebody after an exhibition that I played for them, and this guy was giving me a hard time at this exhibition for some match I'd lost or some balls I'd missed, and he'd had a bet on this match, and he was giving me a hard time that I'd lost the game, and he'd lost his accumulator on me or whatever it was. And I just said to him, well, I think one of the things you guys sometimes forget is that those nerves and being out there and performing and wanting to win, sometimes you just get a bit nervous. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in these big games, you see players close up, they shake. some players are so they physically shake.
But you
And
like that
it's
when you
not.
started off? You came in, I mean, obviously, like turning pro at 15, there's not many players turn professional at 15, Sean, who reach the top. You know, were you nervous then? Were you shaking then? No thanks.
I remember my first professional match was at the Plymouth Pavilions in 1998, and I walked out to play the qualifiers against Dermot McGlinchey, who was a wonderful player and a really nice man from the Republic of Ireland,
That's right.
and real nice guy. And I remember walking out there, I just felt sick. I wanted to go. And I remember at the interval, I came out and I was losing 3-1. And my dad was there and he was like, "How'd you feel? Are you enjoy it?" And I said, "I want to go home. I don't like it.
Right, okay.
I don't like it."
All right.
And, at that stage, I'd played in the Doc Martens had sponsored me at that stage, and they had the Premier League. So I'd done those exhibition frames, which they were quite well known at the time. So I'd done that. I was used to playing in front of crowds and all that type of thing. But I remember going out there, I just felt physically sick. And coming full circle now, dealing with those pressures of whether you want to win so badly or you want to perform well or just being nervous because you want to win and the other guy's good as well. Like all of those things can have an effect. And that's when having a sound, solid technique that can operate automatically without you having to think about it. Not thinking, right, which finger comes off the grip here when I take it back and how do they reconnect and is my cue on my chest and how's my bridge? And, without having to think about that really takes the pressure off. And I remember Colin Montgomery, a golfer, he said his career started to go on the downer when he started playing golf, trying to work out how to play golf. And I think if you're out there in the arena trying to find your action, trying to work on your game whilst you're trying to win a snooker match, then you're on a very slippery slope.
Golf's a great sport. A lot of good snooker players golf. I know you've got a low handicap. I've been trying to play golf for 30 years. The guys, I stopped playing a couple of years ago. The young guys I was playing with, they're all 4 or 5 handicappers. They were just laughing at me, Sean. They were laughing at me. I mean, I could smack a ball 300 yards, but they were hitting the ball 320, 340, with 300-pound drivers, Well, at least I made them laugh, But I have to stop it. But it's a great sport. But I know I'm just going to touch on golf for a second because I know I'm not sure, Sean. Just remind me, was he a professional? Maybe I've got this wrong. Your father wasn't a professional golfer, was he? No.
He was a professional golfer, in his early life. Yeah, he was. For a year or two, he would have been a professional attached to a club in Manchester, yeah.
And you've always been, as far as I know, I haven't talked to you about this before, but you're a pretty proficient golfer. What's your handicap at the moment?
At the moment, it's scratch. I got to scratch 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago.
This is one of the questions.
Sorry. Oh, right. Okay. Right. Yeah.
No, I'm going to let you extend on that. I keep interrupting the guys. I'll talk as much as you do. One of the questions was, would golf have been perhaps a professional sport for you?
No, I don't think so. It never. I never got to the point where I had to choose between snooker or golf. It was always snooker for me. I'm not good in the sun. I don't tan well, so it was the right choice. I think most snooker players, not many of us are good in the sun. We're all used to dark, shady snooker rooms, and you look like you've got a similar
blood pressure
look to me, right. And moving on, and I was never in that time where snooker and the golf really questioned it. I did after I was given a good talking to by a few people. I think I'd got my car. I was 18 or 19. I was driving. I was independent, and I was playing a lot of golf with my mates. I had no commitments. I had a sponsored car with my name down the side. What an idiot! And we were just like, we were meeting at the snooker club and then saying, right, let's go for a game of golf. Stick this. This is like, let's go. Like the sun's shining. Of course, my snooker career started to nosedive. My golf handicap started to go like this. I started to get better at the golf. And I was playing 36, 54 holes in a day and doing an hour's snooker practice, if even, maybe 3 or 4 times a week, and wondering why I wasn't getting any results. So there was a time where I needed that talking to off a few people to say, listen, are you being a snooker player or are you being a golfer? Which one are you doing here? So, there was that. But no, I think I definitely made the right choice without question.
And so before we go on to some of the questions here, try and combine some of them as well. Looking back over your whole career, obviously you came in really, really young. As I say, you've been at the top for years. It's very tough to do. Where do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself now in the game? Where do you see?
Well, I suppose really, as I say, the season we were in the middle of, I say in the middle of, we had 2 events left. That is and has been and was my best season on record. Whilst I've not picked up a major, I've never played a season and won 2 ranking events in the same year. But I think my level of play this season has been very high. And I've been very, very happy with where my game's been going. I've been working very hard again with Chris Henry, and I've mentioned Fergal a number of times. He's absolutely sick of it.
I'm sick.
I've been working very, very hard, and I have to say, I think I'm actually now sat here now talking to you now, is the best I've ever been as a snooker player. I'm a better player now than I was in 15, in 9, and in 2005, where I obviously got to the final of the greatest championship of them all. Does that mean you're going to win more tournaments? No, because everyone else is really good as well, and everyone else has improved. I mean, how many years have I been on tour now? 20, 21 years on tour, something like that. The standard on the tour from the top to the bottom is just the best it's ever been. This argument rages about like the top 10, are they as good now as they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30? Who cares? It's an argument you're never going to settle. You're never going to know. Would Steve Davis have lived in the top 16 today? And you're just never going to know that. But the standard on tour from number 1 to 128, and the guys that are coming through Challenge Tour, and the guys that come through Q School, is seriously, seriously good. And it's it's a great time to be a snooker player. It's a great time to be on tour and have these opportunities.
Certainly more money anyway. In that respect, you touched on Steve Davis there. Steve Davis has complimented you in the past. I don't know why. No, actually,
I do. I pay him quite well. I pay him well.
I'm going to agree with Steve on one thing. Okay, I'm going to agree with Steve Davis in a sense that you've probably got the best Q action. Now, Steve Davis has said this. He has said this, and you do actually have one of the best Q actions. Ronnie's got a great Q action. Sometimes it's a little erratic. Sometimes you're going to lose it a little bit, but your Q action is, would you not say yourself, strong point, long ball pattern, cue ball control? Oh, believe me, it's right up there. It's right up there. Yeah. Is that your strong
I think it depends. I think it's always an interesting one, and I would never. I'm certainly not going to give myself accolades. It's very generous of you to say, but I think when people say you've got a great cue action or what, I'm never really sure what that means. I've never really been 100% sure what the cue what they mean by that. Because really all the cue action is trying to return the cue to your address position at the cue ball and hit the cue ball where you meant to.
That's right.
That's really all it is. And it's actually something that, I've been working very hard on the last couple of seasons, because a little technical fault had come into my game where I was, addressing the cue ball in the right place. I was sighting the ball properly, was making those good decisions we were talking about. But then at the very last moment, every now and again, I wasn't hitting the cue ball where I meant to.
Right.
And so the cue ball wasn't going in the direction I wanted it to, wasn't hitting the object ball in the correct position. And I was either missing the pot or the ball was going in the wrong part of the pocket. And then the white isn't going in the right place. So your cue ball control isn't as good. Or your safety play isn't as good because you hit the object ball slightly too thin or slightly too thick, just because at impact, you didn't hit that cue ball exactly where you meant to. And that's something that Chris, again, for a name check to Chris, that's something that we've worked incredibly hard on over the last season, maybe 2 seasons, to just improve that consistency of hit that ball where you mean to. And it sounds so simple, and it is so simple. But obviously, if you don't hit it correctly, it can go anywhere and anything could happen. And people say to me, they say, "No, what are you working on now?" And it's literally that. That is it. When I choose to hit the white there, can I hit it exactly there?
I think you've just answered the question there, Shaun. To be honest with you, for me, good cue action is pretty much going right back to the very basics of what it is, which is repeating the shot. It's repetition. Yeah. It's if you're cueing really well, then there's very little movement. There's complete focus, restricted movement, repetition. I think that in essence is a superb cue action. I mean, Ronnie has that. I mean, you might look at Ronnie. Ronnie can whatever the hell's going on in that man's head. Nobody can ever work him out anyway. I mean, when he's walking around the table and he's playing the shot, but if you actually watch him shooting, he's a machine. His cue action is superb. It is, and
very good.
You can have a look at your own, and I look at your cue action, and I see a player who's very focused and very composed, and who is probably getting as close to hitting the ball precisely exactly where he wants to hit it. And I think for me, that's the fundamentals of a good cue action. So that's and I think I've just repeated what you just said, actually. I feel like one of those politicians,
yeah.
The pandemic. Anyway, let's touch on Henry. The coach Henry. You keep mentioning his name, and that was one of the next things I was going to talk about. The coaching. The coaching has had a great effect on you, Henry. Touch on that, Henry. Cue action. How much has he helped you? Has he really helped you, or?
Well, I think the great thing with Chris is, as far as we call it cue ball mechanics, as terms of, how it actually works when you hit the ball, there and it goes over there, how it all works together. In my opinion, he is the man, and it's great to be able to look at a shot and go, right, we tried to do X, actually we got Y. How and why did that happen? And it's great to be able to have those conversations with somebody who, and this is why for me he's such a great coach, is because he's played the game to a very high level. He has walked out there and played in front of the TV cameras himself. As I say, he played to an extremely high level, knows what it's like out there, and understands the technique of the game as well, if not better than anyone else. So it's great to be able to have those conversations. And of course, when you do delve into it with someone as knowledgeable as Chris, you can only come out of it better. And he really has. He's been my 12th man, really. He's been my corner man for a long, long time. and we'll be going forward.
Very good. And let's just touch on sightright for a wee second here. Okay.
Yeah.
What has that done for you? Is that something you believe in, and how has it helped you?
Well, sightright, revolutionized my game. I didn't know, like many, I commented on sightright before I actually knew what it was. There was quite a lot of criticism thrown around about it, people being skeptical about it. I think people thought that it was a bit gimmicky.
Yep.
And I've always prided myself on being somebody that if I'm going to say something to you about something, I want to know about it first. If I'm going to promote something, I need to understand it and it has to work. If I'm going to put my name to it and my reputation on the line for a product or a person or whoever it might be, it has to be right. So I called Steve Feeney. I said, can we have a session? I'd love to know how sightright works. I'd like to know if it can help me. I've got a few issues in my game and I want to understand how it works. He said, not a problem. We arranged the session and within a minute on the table, we had a bit of a chat. Had a coffee and a bit of a chat. Then we got on the table and within a minute, it changed my game forever. And it is, in terms of on-table play, in terms of on-table coaching, it's just been a game changer for me.
Can you be a little specific about what it was when you were on the table with Feeney? Can you touch on, just for the guys at home, the amateurs?
Yeah.
Is there anything specific you could just touch on there, like a particular type of shot?
I think there's a lot of people out there don't really understand what sightright is. They think it's maybe a different way of hitting the ball or a different action or standing in a different place. Sightright is this in a nutshell. When you're stood at the address position, when you are deciding how to play the shot in front of you, when you are sighting the ball, how do you know whether you're stood in the right place? That's it. So you could have the best eyes, the best action, the best shot selection, but at the point where you chose where to aim the ball, you were stood in the wrong place for your own vision specifics. Because everyone's eyes are different. Everyone's eyes work in a different way. What I think is straight, you would think was slightly off, and vice versa. And the sightright tech is all about that. Now, obviously, I cannot, go into full detail about it. Would be remiss of me. But in terms of what it is in a nutshell, how do you know as the player at that moment where you make your decisions on where you're going to strike that ball for your own vision requirements? How do you know that you're stood in the correct position? And for me, it's been vital. And if I could just finish my point, we are all taught. I was taught. You were probably taught. Everyone out there was taught to sight the ball with their cue on the line of the shot for a right-handed player with the butt of the cue on their right hip, and you almost lean over like that when you're sighting the ball. We were all taught to do that because Joe Davis, when he wrote the first snooker manual in 1945 or whenever it was, the Bible, how I play snooker, he decided that was the way you had to do it. Like, it's just ridiculous that we've all done it for so long. We've all gone along with it.
Yeah.
He must be laughing his head off somewhere. He's had it right off. No one's questioned it. But in all seriousness, no. We only do that because he put it on paper first. He said, this is how you do it. Do it like this.
He wrote the manual. Everybody goes by the textbook. Yeah. So did you talk about, just before we leave, right? Did you talk about things like eye dominance and stuff like that there? I mean, are you left or right eyed? Do you know which eye? Do you have a strong eye?
I'm slightly right eye dominant, slightly.
Right. And you're right-handed, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, you're right-handed, so you're right-eyed. It's a big problem, you see, for players who are left eye dominant like me, because sometimes if you have a weak right eye, you're not seeing the true angle, the true shot.
Absolutely.
I tell.
So I said to Steve when we had a when we had our first session together, I put on this particular shot on the table that I was struggling with, and he watched me play the shot, and he said, okay. He said, implement the things that I've just shown you on the table, which I did. I hit the shot perfectly. In golfing terms, this was the way I put it at the time. In golfing terms, when you're trying to get the ball around a golf course, and if I do miss the fairway, I know I'm only going to miss it on the left side or the right side. The worst possible thing is to stand there and not know where it's going to go. So in snooker terms, I was standing up to play a shot. I didn't know if I was going to hit it thick, thin, or in the correct position. And what sightright gave me back was I knew if I was expecting to either pop the ball or miss it slightly thick or thin, it gave me back that sort of preconceived idea of you. So then I knew that the cue ball would follow the expected route, and I might get the safety shot or the shot to nothing or whatever it might be. Whereas I'd spent years playing shots where, if I missed it, I could miss it anyway, could miss it thick, thin, anything you want. But with sightright, what it gave me was that I was always going to get the second part of the shot correct.
No, very interesting point there. Thanks for sharing that with us, Shaun. Lads, this is one of the reasons why I get players at the top of Shaun on here to talk about sightright, because it's actually something I understand a little bit, and I know why it's there. And I think you should watch and listen as much as possible. So hopefully you've listened to Shaun. Anyway, we're going to touch on some questions here, Shaun, because as usual, they're so exciting that the time's just flying. Are you okay for time? You're enjoying this, by the way. I can tell. You're absolutely loving this, by the way. You really are.
I've been in lockdown for 10 weeks. I just like talking about snooker. I just want to talk about snooker to somebody. It's fabulous.
I know. I've been putting you on for weeks because there's lots of exciting players out there, but I didn't realize you were going to be this good.
Oh, no.
No idea. No. Anyway, looking back over your career, very simply, this is one of the questions as well. Is there any part of the game you would have liked to have improved?
I think over the years I've played far too many shots, and Ray Reardon said this to me maybe 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago, because my time with Ray Reardon wasn't as well publicised as Ronnie's was. Ronnie had him in his corner at the Crucible at a lot of events. I used to go and see Ray for a period of 3 or 4 years, and I used to go and see him 2 or 3 times a year, and we'd have a couple of days together, a bit of golf, quite a lot of snooker, a bit of billiards, and it was just great to chat to him about things. And he said something to me which I didn't really grasp at the time. And he said, Shaun, you play too many shots that could be your last. And it didn't land. It didn't land. I was too young, a bit pig-headed, thought I knew better. I'll stick with my game, Ray. Thanks very much. I'll play my way. This is how I go for sure. I'm going to go. If I'm going to lose, I'm going to go down fighting. This is my strength. I've got to keep going for these shots. I've lost another match I shouldn't have done. Right. No, now I've got to get back on the bike. Oh, I've done it again. Right. No, but it will work. It will work. Oh, crap. It took me a long time to accept that, yeah, I played too many shots that could be my last. So I've made that improvement over the last season or two, where I've added a bit of a shot to nothing element to my strategy. I play a lot more long pots now with the cue ball going back into a defensive position just in case. Whereas I've played all my life going completely for glory. This ball has to go in. And if it does, I've got a chance. If I miss it, I lose. That's how I've played all my life. And I've just the last couple of years tried to just tweak that a little bit, as have a lot of other players I've watched, and they've had success with that too. And so I suppose to answer the question, if I could go back in a time machine to day one, I would just take myself off the side and say, listen, don't do that. Do this.
Do you watch yourself? You know, we talk about tweaks. Players, I always encourage young players, the kind of players that win my pro-ams, you know, I always encourage them to have a look at their game. All right, they're not going to be on YouTube. A lot of the lower ranked professionals are going to be on YouTube, but you should really analyze your game a little bit more. Take a look at the weaknesses, know the weak areas of your game. So that's technical in one sense. This is different completely. Would you say that taking a look at the very weak parts of a young amateur's game is very, very important?
Very, very important. And you don't really understand your own game until you've seen it on camera. You don't really understand how does your technique look? Is your backswing longer than you thought it was?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I took a lot longer over that shot than it felt like. I ran round the table faster there than I thought. I should have taken a bit more time. Should have been a bit more. You can't get that unless you watch it back. And I think it's important. You know, I watch all my matches back. Not from a narcissistic point of view. I don't like watching myself on TV. I don't like listening to myself speak. I don't like all of that. But I have to watch it back so I can see, right, why did I play that shot like that at that time? Why did I do it?
Mm-hmm.
When my opponent missed a shot unexpectedly, why did I jump out of my seat like a greyhound
mm-hmm.
and then rush to the table and make a mistake? What was that? And you only get that from watching games back. Now, obviously, things have come on leaps and bounds in a very short space of time in terms of streaming, YouTube, Facebook. Any match, whether it's on TV or not now, you can watch back somehow. Somebody's always uploading them. And, it's been a great service to all the players that have used it. And I think a lot more players do it than they say.
No, interesting point. I think there you go, lads. So, obviously, if you're not on YouTube, get yourselves a little video camera and just put it over the table. Have a look at yourselves. Just play for an hour, or how difficult is it to put a camera and just in the corner, just have a look at yourself? It's easy to do, isn't it? It's just
I think it's one of those things. I think it's one of those things that we're all so used to watching snooker and being critical of it, watching it and just critiquing shot selection. Oh, I wouldn't have played that like that myself. Oh, I wouldn't have done that. That when you watch yourself, you'll be amazed at what you see, and you say, "Oh my God, I didn't realize I did that," or "I didn't realize I played that like." Why did I do it like that? And I think there's a big resource there for players that goes untapped. I don't know any young professional golfer or young amateur golfer that doesn't video themselves on the driving range, have multiple cameras, a swing coach, a this, a that, or the other. They're all into it. And I think the younger players coming through in snooker, it's just a generational thing, I think. And I think, in years to come, you'll see everyone at it.
Well, I used to record my drives off the tee so they could have a good laugh, and share it over Facebook. I was disgusted with them.
Mean, isn't it? It's just mean. It's just mean.
Goodness me, there's no need. There's absolutely no need for that at all.
Just no need for it.
No. Anyway, right, we're going to touch on some questions here, okay? Because it's, as usual, it takes about an hour to get the questions because you're such an interesting chap to speak to. Very, very, very good stuff there, mate, on sightright as well. Okay, let's have a little look here, see who's on. Everybody thinks you're very honest, Shaun.
Very honest.
I think you're very, very righteous and honest. Ben Honcorn, a few ladies on here don't like you very much. Oh, let's see, suffering up down there too. Yes, oh yeah, he does. Yeah. Why do they have to do this? Why do you have to bring up haircuts? Nobody can go to the barbers. All right, Shaun's allowed to have some long hair. All right, it's nothing wrong with that.
I'm walking around here now. I'm walking around like the fifth Beatle. It's ridiculous.
Shaun, I wouldn't do that for too long. There's
Oh,
something
it's just
going on up there, and I'm not going to bring it up a bit later, but things are getting a wee bit thin up there, you know?
what? You're joking?
No, I'm speaking from experience. I was where you are when I was your age, and I'm a lot older than you, by the way.
You haven't got many haircuts left, Dave. Got to be honest.
Right
Hang
now,
on a minute.
you got Lee Smith. Question for Shaun: what percentage of natural ability will see you through versus hard work? Did you get that?
Yeah. Listen, I think you know, in an ideal world, it's a bit like when people say, "Is it we're talking about practice? Is it quality over quantity? Which one's more important?" In an ideal world, you'd have lots of both. In an absolute ideal world, you'd have a lot of talent and a lot of hard work, and usually those people are the ones that achieve legendary status. They were very talented, and they harnessed that talent with hour after hour after hour. And then either side of that, if that's like the middle lane on the motorway, they're the ones who do the best. And then either side of that, in either lane, you've got somebody with not quite as much talent, but a bigger work ethic. And then the vice versa over here, somebody who, has bags of talent, but, doesn't quite work as hard. So as I say, in an ideal world, you'd have equal amounts of both. I think if you could only have one, though, I'd always choose. So if I was picking a team, I'd always choose the hard worker over the person with more talent. Because generally, the people with more talent, the real talented guys that don't work hard, they don't think they have to work hard, and that ends up tripping them up.
Very natural, just like myself. It's okay. Anyway, by the way, it was Phil Seymour who made the comments about your hair. Do you know Phil?
I do. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Anyway, Colin Phillips. You know Colin, don't you?
I do.
He's so dull.
Listen, this is your channel. I can't say these. This is your channel.
Colin wants to know what your favorite practice routine is, and how do you feel it works for you, and how it would benefit others.
Yeah, well, I think like the things that I practice vary from, day to day, week to week, depending on what I'm trying to improve on. And as I said earlier on, what I've been working on recently in recent weeks, months, and maybe the last season is trying to improve my consistency of striking that cue ball exactly where I want to. That's what I've been working on the most. Yeah, I've been doing lineups and I've been doing tees and crosses and cue ball control things. And I'll come on to them in a moment because they've got their place. But I think, I've been doing a lot of work. Now, of course, people are going to assume this is a sales pitch. It isn't. But I have been doing a lot of work with the product called The Balls, which Chris Henry has designed, which are these ultra lightweight cue ball and object ball. Then if you don't strike the cue ball exactly in the center, the cue ball doesn't go in a straight line.
Wow, interesting.
And what's that talk now? It's very important to say from the outset that doesn't mean you have to play every shot in the center of the cue ball. That's not what they're teaching. What the balls are teaching are when you intend to strike the cue ball in the middle, can you? That's one of the things they teach. And one of the practice routines with this lightweight cue ball is you put the ball on the yellow spot and you have to pop that ball on its own into what we call the number one pocket, which is the far left black pocket. And if you don't strike that cue ball, this lightweight cue ball, exactly in the center, you can't pot it. It doesn't go anywhere near the pocket. It's hilarious.
I haven't heard of that.
The first one I tried missed the pocket up the side cushion by about 18 inches. It was hilarious.
And this is obviously testing your cue ball striking. It has, but I've spoken to some very old coaches in the past, Shaun, and they've convinced me that nobody really ever hits that cue ball perfect. Nobody ever will
No.
You'll get very close to hitting the dead center if you have to. If you have to hit the dead center, nobody's ever going to hit it exactly precisely where you want to hit it. But that's very, very interesting. Actually, that guys, get out there and sort that out, will you? Get out and hit those balls and make sure you put the right amount of sight on the balls. We got here a question. How do you manage to keep such a high level of concentration? Oh, okay, that's a good question. Oh, by the way, I'm getting some people here on here, Shaun. All right, I know I look like Rick Harrison, the Pawn Stars guy. I know I look like him, guys. Okay, I don't have his money, but if he wants to come along and I can sell some stuff here online.
So what you have got? You've got a nicer cat than I've got.
How about Chanel? I rescued her. She's a pain in the ass, mate. Sorry, honey. I'm sorry. Okay, don't scratch me. Anyway, Abe Mitchell's got a question for you. How do you manage to keep such a high level of concentration during a session?
Yeah, well, I mean that's the thing we haven't talked about. We talk about composure and technique. Well, the next one, or maybe even above them all, although composure for me is still at the top. Concentration, being in the now, thinking about what you're doing, not everything else, is just, it's so important. And I guess really, as linked with composure, when you see a top player at anything underperform, it has to be concentration. When you see that player miss a routine black off the spot, you can be certain of one thing, that they were not thinking about potting that ball into the pocket. They can't be. They're too good to think about it, to try and do it, and not do it.
Interesting.
When you see these routine, and I'm talking about routine mistakes, I'm talking about shots your nana could get. When you see the professionals miss those shots, they cannot possibly have been thinking about put that ball in the pocket and put the cue ball there. They can't be doing it because they're so good and they've practiced so much that if they did do that, it would go in the pocket and the cue ball would go over there. So the concentration element linked with technique and composure really is in my opinion, is the secret to success. I've watched, as I said, I've been watching so much of the 80s and 90s. And when you watch Davis in his pomp in the 80s and Hendry, those two above everyone else. Yes, I mean, they both had better techniques than most, and they had a lot of other things going for them as well. But their concentration was out of this world, and it's something that doesn't get praised as much as it should. Their ability to focus on what they were trying to achieve for long periods of time it's just mind-blowing. It's very, very difficult to do. And it probably is one of the key reasons as why some days you'll see a player play to such a high level, and then on another day they won't quite play to that level again. And it's on those days where they can get taken by someone, they can get beaten.
You talk about concentration too. A lot of young players who have just joined the tour, who are really struggling. There's a lot of them down there. So they're traveling to events. They're they're traveling to different venues all the time. They're under pressure. Very hard for them to concentrate sometimes, to focus, because they're really struggling to get those first wins behind them to give them a bit of confidence. But concentration can be very easily taken away from distraction. Is there anything that particularly distracts you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have that phone's distracting me. Hang on.
Throw it out the window. Throw it out the window.
Yeah, I have one of those minds that when I'm in the arena, there's a lot of things in a snooker arena that can possibly distract you, that can put you off. There's a lot of stuff in there to take your focus away. You're trying to laser beam onto this, and there's lots of things flying around. There's cameramen, there's the cameras themselves, there's the TV studio bubble that's in a lot of arenas these days. There's the photographers with the long lenses. Then there's the crowd who they don't mean to put you off, but they've got the sweet wrappers, the old cliches of rustling their sweets or their crisps, fizzy drinks, phones, people's watches that still beep on the hour. I'm not sure who still wears one of those watches, but they all seem to come to the snooker. We're talking about pandemics and everything that's going on. I think if NHS England want to take the nation's temperature, they should come to a snooker tournament, because you've never seen so many people cough in a quiet moment as people seem to do at the snooker. Like, if you go to the cinema, nobody coughs.
Mm-hmm.
You go to watch a play or something on the West End or the ballet or whatever no one says, nobody coughs. There's no, but everyone seems to have a bad cough at the snooker, and all of these things can put you off and distract you. But it is true. It is absolutely true that when you are in that zone, when you are in that tunnel zone, you just don't see those things, or you're kind of aware of them out there, but you just don't let them into your zone. You don't let them in. Because I've got this, it's not. I don't have a photographic memory at all. But I will walk into a room and I spot that and I spot that. That's out of place. That's the wrong colour. That should be over there. I have to work. I personally have to work very hard when I'm playing snooker to focus in on all of the. Get rid of all of those things. Turn the volume down on all of that stuff, and just play snooker.
Well, that is at your level, Luke. When you're conscious of a lot of those noises and those things that are going on, I accept that. But the other thing, the one thing I don't accept is that you take players that come to my competitions to go to a club and playing on 4 tables where there's noise coming from the bar, a wee bit of background music, somebody at the bar shaking a glass or breaking wind or burping. Your player next to you is up your backside with a cue, and what it is, you have to adapt. You're supposed to be focusing on the base,
but there's a big difference between it's like the shootout. There's a big difference between concentrating at the shootout where everyone's making noise. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of things to distract you. Concentrating in that environment is fine.
Yep.
But concentrating in a silent environment and then being disturbed, that's different. It's not trying to concentrate whilst there's noise. Concentrating, playing snooker whilst there's noise going on is absolutely fine. Yeah, and God forbid if all the tournaments were like the shootout. God forbid. But if they were, it'd be all the players would adapt to it. We'd all get on with it, absolutely no problem. It's when you're out there playing and you're on your final backswing and it's silent and then somebody's phone goes off. That's very, very distracting.
I think you're just spoiled. You're just spoiled. Yeah. You're right up there at the top. You're looking at the wee boys in the practice rooms and the working men's clubs. They're listening to all those noises. You're spoiled. You're a spoiled snooker player.
Right.
By the way, Colin Phillips has come back on again. Did I ask you that question already? What's your favourite practice? Oh, I've asked you that. Have a favourite practice routine. Porn stars. Here we go again. What's with the porn stars thing?
I knew I'd seen that moustache somewhere before.
Let me tell you.
I knew it.
Just needs a little bit of dark.
Just for men.
Darkness there. I'll take about 10. That's such a little tiny baby face. We're lucky. We're always going to look young, Shaun, because we have tiny faces. We're always going to look young.
Yeah.
Women love me. They love my little nose and little bald head and they're dropping. Honestly, I'm not going to tell you how far they go. They go far. All the time. Let's see. Oh, Shaun, oh, what's this? Del Boy. Del Boy. Del Boy. David Del Boy Church. He's asking about the trigger finger squeeze on delivery of grip hand. What's your opinion on that? So trigger finger squeeze on delivery. What is your take on that? The grip as well.
you're gonna have to forgive me, because you've used a few words there together that I have absolutely no idea what you mean.
Finger.
I don't know what that means.
Trigger finger.
And this,
Squeeze.
I think I sort of half mentioned it earlier, where you get people who are very technically involved, thinking about, as the cue goes back, they release 1 and then 2 and then 3, and which ones come back on in which order, and does the cue stay connected to their chest? And I have to admit, that's just not the way I was taught. So
I think Dale wants to go and do a bit of target shooting.
Well, no, I'm sure there are people out there who teach methods and get involved to that level, and maybe I should know more about that. But I was literally, in terms of how to grip the cue, the way I was told was actually out of a Joe Davis book, which was, you put the cue on the table and you pick it up, and however it naturally sits in your hand, that's the grip for you. It isn't really like the golf grip. In golf, you can have the overlap, the interlock, the baseball, and you can, if you turn your hand slightly more like that, it affects. Snooker isn't quite like that. Obviously, you want to have a nice grip, loose, but I would, in my opinion, I would really stay away from going that deep into which finger, reconnects at which stage, which is the trigger finger, and all of that. That's for me, that's too deep. That's too involved.
No, you're right. Dale boy, get yourself up at Disney and do a bit of target shooting, mate. Also about trigger fingers, squeezing and breathing. Okay? I suppose breathing's got a little bit.
Breathing's important. Breathing is important.
So do you hold your breath, Shaun? Do you like?
No, I'm not. No. I'm in the camp. I think oxygen's a good thing. I'm not a holder of breath. There have been players, and there are players who hold their breath on the shot. But yeah, no, you're into a realm I can't go. I can't go there with you.
1, 2, 3.
I can't do it.
There's got to be a technique in there somewhere. It has to be. I don't know. There goes further consistent, much more measured around the table. Yeah, I know he is. He's good. We all know you're good, Shaun. Not to keep reminding us how good he is. Shaun keeps telling me how good he is all the time. When he wakes me up at 2 o'clock in the morning, begging me to come on the show.
Not good. It wasn't quite 2, was it? It wasn't quite 2 o'clock.
Well, you woke me up. Who's the best player ever? Okay, here's a question. This is straight out there. I've stopped asking a lot of these types of questions, but who's the best player ever? Is it Ronnie or is it Hendry? Or is it someone else?
Yeah. I mean, isn't just to go off on a mad tangent for a minute, like you just ended there by saying, is it somebody else? Isn't it mad to think that out there somewhere, like, working with the cattle in Australia, there could be a farmer who's actually the most gifted cue sports person we've ever seen.
He hasn't picked me up yet.
But he's never been given it. No one's ever given him a cue. He could be out there. She could be out there. He or she could be out there somewhere. I think who's the greatest? It depends what you mean by the greatest. It depends on how people want to rank it. If it's on how many world championships you've won, then it's Hendry. Certainly of the modern era, from the 60s onwards. If it's on world championships, it's Hendry. If it's on, I think, pound for pound, a player's player, then it's O'Sullivan by some distance, because the things that he can do are mesmeric, just out of this world. When he's on, he's very close. He's not unbeatable, but he is very close to unbeatable when he's on. And his control and his shots and all of the things that go into it, are fabulous. I think technique. I think Steve Davis had the best technique. If it's on total tournament wins, I think it's Hendry, or it could be Davis. I'm not sure. Not sure who's got the most all-round tournament wins out of those two. It depends how you want to grade it. In terms of pure playing ability, it has to be Ronnie O'Sullivan. Has to be.
I think so. I totally agree with that. As much as he gets on my nerves a bit. Short family players. Ben Hunt is good. Player. Not Shaun. New training balls. Oh yes, we talked about the new training balls, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody's just come on there, Stuart. Thanks, Stuart. By the way, guys, I'm just catching up with the questions because I like to get through them quickly, so I can let this man go to bed and give his baby a kiss. Let me see here. New training balls. Yeah, very good. So, yeah, Paul, get hold of those training balls, guys. I don't know how much they are. Shaun, have you any idea how much these training balls are?
I'm not sure. Chris does have an online shop. I think it's on Chris Henry International or something like that. As I say, it wasn't a sales pitch. Otherwise, I'd have more details to hand. Chris will kill me, but they are a great training asset. They are fantastic, to use, and they work as well. So, there's a good reason to have them.
You got another world championship in you, Shaun?
Geez, I mean that's the question, isn't it? I'd like to think so. I really would like to think so. There have been some really dark, low moments in my career where I've just thought, no, that's it. Now I'm on a downward spiral. I'll never play in another world final or another one table situation at the Crucible, or my time's come and gone. I had my 3 finals and I won one of them. But I think I was, that was a year or two ago where I was, a very low point in my career. Certainly the way the season was going, I definitely would have gone to Sheffield very confident of having a really good run. And I really think that, the changes I have made to my game on and off the table, hopefully will give me every chance of having some real long runs in that tournament, over the next few years. I don't know how many years I've got left, sort of at the top end of the game. Who knows? But I'd certainly like to think that I'll definitely have opportunities in the years to come. I'd like to think I've got another one in me, but who knows?
It's my Canadian friend, a guy called James Barry. He came all the way over to Canada just to play in my pro-am. What a lovely guy. No, he didn't. He was seeing some family, But anyway, he's got a question here. He's not a bad snooker player, actually. He wants to know, Shaun, where do you put your right foot in relation to the line of aim? And he wants to know about some of your routines as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, pre-sightright, I would have sighted the ball before I get down to the shot. I would have stood there with my right foot on the line of aim, and I would have walked into the shot as Joe Davis has taught us since day dot.
Yeah.
Once you put sightright into your game, you cannot go back. And if you look at pretty much every player who's been to Steve Feeney, whether they're still working with him or not, most of them still use those techniques. If you know what you're looking for, you can actually see them still doing it. There's I wouldn't name them by now. I wouldn't go through the list, but I would say a lot of them still would use those techniques. So now when I sight the ball, I'm a little bit further over the line. I'm actually more, the line of the shot would be more around my belt buckle. So I actually have to cross the line now to play my shot. I still get into the same position at address. I'm still stood in the same place, but I have arrived there in a different way because it doesn't matter where your cue is in relation to your hip. It's about what your eyes see. So I now walk into the shot with my eyes on the line of the shot, not this fictitious area over here that Joe Davis decided it had to be. In terms of practice routines, I would do all the practice routines that everybody does, the lineups, the T shapes, the X, averages, long pots, working with the Chris Henry balls, as I've already mentioned, rest play, working it, do it. It's nice to play the odd little shot with the spider just so you get the feel. Because who knows, that shot to win your local handicap tournament or the club championship or the world championship might be with the spider. It might be with the swan neck. Mm-hmm. When was the last time anyone practiced with the swan? What happens if the shot to win the tour championships is with the swan? That's the equivalent to a golfer not practicing out of a bunker. That's it doesn't make any sense. So it's important, I think, to run through all of these shots. The biggest thing I practice now these days is my concentration. So instead of going for an extremely difficult routine and trying to complete it, what I now do is go for a more basic routine that I know I should complete, and then I make myself complete it for either a given amount of time or a set amount of repeats. So if I'm doing the lineup, I used to do the lineup. I had to take each red in individual order, or I had to play each red with a black or a pink or from a certain side of the or one of those other things. I don't do that anymore. Now what I do is I do the lineup, and I do it for an hour.
Wow.
And if I miss, I have to stop and I have to start.
Yeah.
If I miss, I have to stop and start again. The target is to do it for an hour. Can you you should do it. Mm-hmm. What you're practicing is to concentrate for that period of time. That's what I'm practicing. When I was 12, I got the opportunity to go and practice with Steve Davis. And my father and I arrived at his club before he got there. And his dad was there, old Bill Davis. And everyone's heard the stories about Bill Davis. And, he coached one of the greatest players that's ever lived. And my dad asked Steve's dad, Bill, this was in 94. So Steve was just starting to just dip a little. They said, you've achieved everything in the game. When you come to practice, what do you practice? And Bill gave the game away straight away. He said, when we practice now, we practice concentration. And if only I'd taken that on board a little bit more. But at 12, 13, 14, 25, 30, you don't take these things on board. You don't take it in. So, I would be practicing little technical things. I'm always working on my action. As I say, hitting that cue ball where intended is vital. But the biggest thing I'm practicing now is the concentration.
Quick fire questions here. These are the standard ones to get. Best of sevens or best of nines?
Best of nines.
Easy one. It's a no-brainer, really, is it?
I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for you that you asked me it, to be honest.
Oh, why?
Well, it's just such an easy question, wasn't it?
I have to ask. Do you know why I have to ask? Because we play best of sevens, and
yes.
I know why that is. I know why they're playing best of sevens. I'm not going to get into it, but everybody prefers best of nines. But anyway, we'll leave it at that.
All the players prefer best of nines.
Of course they do. Right, this is a question from Steve Martin. Steve's playing a couple of my pro-ams a couple of years ago. Very good snooker player, actually, Steve. I want to get you back to the club soon, mate. Anyway, he's got a question for you, Shaun. What would you do to improve the grassroots of snooker in the UK?
Well, I a few years ago, there was a group of us got together, and we really wanted to try and revolutionise the amateur body, the EASB in England, and we wanted to feed that into the UK. And there was talk of we were trying to not disband the NGBs, but we wanted them to merge and we wanted them to work together, because there's quite a lot of we want to be bigger than you, and we're a bit older than you, and there's a bit of that amongst all national governing bodies, not just in the UK. And I really thought there was an opportunity there a few years ago with Snooker Backer, who used to run a lot of tournaments. Yeah, very well thought of, yep. Amongst the amateurs and everyone that knows him. And I really thought there was an opportunity there for him to get involved and merge his extremely successful amateur tour with an NGB, or set up a new national governing body and let him run it. Just because you're very good at that, do it, and everyone will come.
I'll tell you what, guys, it's not often you get a top professional snooker player actually, talking about the problems in the amateur game. Shaun, you just hit it on the head. Because the amateur game, in my view, is in a bit of a mess at the minute. I had a debate on it, by the way. It's on YouTube. You can take a look at it when you get bored. But a lot of players were talking about where they are in the amateur game and talking about the problems with the format of the Challenge Tour. Slightly different changes they could make it to make it an interesting, maybe a more opportune event, or they could possibly maybe open it up a little bit, or other ideas like scrapping Q School and creating an amateur tour where you had a fast turnover of players coming on and off the tour, which is not a bad idea actually, but it's very hard to take.
I think what I can say, if I could just make this point before we move on, for everyone watching, just to make this point, the Players Commission, which is quite a recent addition to the professional game, and obviously since Barry Hearn got involved, World Snooker Limited, now World Snooker Tour, and WPBSA have separated. They are not the same thing. I can assure people out there that these entities are aware of and are trying to solve and fix the problems of the amateur game. Far and wide, not just with the UK. WPBSA created the WSF, the World Snooker Federation, and with the sole purpose of trying to bring these things together and make it better. Before anyone starts saying about scrapping Challenge Tour, scrapping Q School, let's do this, do that, people should remember these things didn't exist until that long ago.
That's true.
And people have been crying out for playing opportunities. They could be better. There's absolutely no question about that. Challenge Tour could be better. Q School there could be more cards. There could be a quicker turnover. It isn't perfect, but it is a work in progress.
Anyway, I'm available. £250,000 a year. All right, just ring me. Barry Hearn rings me all the time. I'm sick of talking to him all the time. I just keep hanging up on him.
$250,000, you'd be willing to take a pay cut, would you?
Don't start on me, Shaun. I'm worth every penny. I'm worth every penny. Right, we're going to wind this down very shortly, just in case you're getting a bit concerned, okay? Dave Morgan's asking you, who do you admire most on the tour and why?
Yeah, I think when you look at people, I admire Ronnie. I admire his longevity. I have a massive respect for, what he's achieved and just what he's able to do. And regardless of what gets said, he grafts, he puts the time in, he works on his game. So I have a lot of admiration for him. And I have a lot of admiration for the staff, people who don't get mentioned. I have a lot of admiration for the backroom people, the people who put these events on, the people who, without these people who rig the venues, who put the sets out, who, facilitate these events going on. Yes, they're all paid. Of course they're paid and they're in positions. But without them, these events wouldn't happen, and they never really get the praise they deserve. The minute the final is over and everyone else is out celebrating, they're in working, and they might join the party 2 or 3 hours later, but they deserve a lot of credit as well.
Just touching on tables, cues, tips, and chalk. What cue have you got? What kind of tips you got on there? What kind of chalk you play with? What's your situation?
Yeah, I use a John Paris Ultimate cue that was sort of made as a replica-ish of a cue that I had since I was 15. The cue that I won the world title with was actually a very old cue and had quite a long history. And it started to fray at the very top end. So I got the thought of, well, I can chop it. But the cue had it had quite an interesting history. I think Ray Reardon had used it at one point. It had been used by a lot of different people over the years. So the thoughts of taking a knife to it turned me off. So I ended up giving that to a friend who'd helped me out a lot throughout my career. And I just said to John Parrish, would you make me a cue? He made me a few, and this one that I use is now the one that I've had now for, it must be getting on for 7 or 8 years now, something like that. It's half an inch shorter than it's 57.5-inch long. It's a 9mm tip. And I've tried all sorts of tips over the years. I really like a lot of the tips out there. It's one of, the tip market has really opened up. It used to be, in my day, it was Blue Diamond or Elkmaster. Now there's, could be 100 different types. I still am a very sort of traditional tip user. I use a very traditional Elkmaster out of the box and straight on. Chalk, I use the latest edition of Towham, the Towham 2.0, the gold. I think it's the one in the gold wrapper. It's the soft. I like it. I think in terms of kicks and big bounces off cushions, nobody, a few years ago, I went on a bit of a mission on Twitter and I said, I'm going to find the reason for kicks. I'm going to work it out. And we found what the reason was very early. It was friction. Any amount of an increase in friction between the two balls colliding was a kick. But nobody ever gave credit to what caused the friction. The chalk was staring at us in the face all along, and no one thought to look at it. Everyone went, including myself, was like, is it the oil in the cloth that when heated, it's eroding the surface of the ball and all this? Now that was happening. Is it the lights? Is it static? Is it this? Is it? It was the chalk. It was the chalk.
You not think there's tiny wee demons out there dancing around the table, getting in between the shots? That's some.
I've been and looked. I have looked. I have to be honest. I have looked. There are no demons present.
They're just kicking up a bit of dust. And boom, that's it. You're gone. I don't know.
Nobody thought to look at the chalk, and I, as well as anyone, I'm very surprised by how much of a difference that chalk has made. It's not kick free. We're not living in a kick free world yet, but we're living in a vastly reduced, problematic world. Certainly, as far as kicks are concerned, anyway.
Yes.
It's not on the news, but it should. It's not on Sky News, but it should be.
Should be.
It should be on Sky News. That's how important it is.
All right.
Breaking news. Breaking news coming in from our snooker correspondent.
Shut it down. Right, we're just going to wrap this up very shortly, Shaun. Right, look, we've got 128 professionals on the tour. Okay.
Yeah.
Because vastly improved, a lot more competitions, a lot more money because of Barry Hearn, obviously. A lot of sponsorship, a lot of Chinese money too. Very good, fantastic. Better than it was years ago. Maybe back in the days, maybe players my age came in where you had maybe 700 registered professionals going to Blackpool, getting through the qualifiers. It's certainly not as bad as those days. But we got 128 professional snooker players, Shaun. Okay, and quite frankly, mate, about a third of them are struggling to make a living. What does that tell us? Does that tell us that there's too many? Maybe not. Does that tell us that the format's wrong? Should it be seeded a little bit? What's your view on that?
Well, I've been quite vocal about this over the years. I wrote a document about this when I was on the board of WPBSA, and I wrote a piece on it on my website, which, to my discredit, I haven't updated in some time, but it's on there. I wrote a piece about this, which in my opinion, if it were up to me, there would be less players on the tour. I think there are too many players on the tour. When you achieve your status as a main tour professional snooker player, your days of qualification should be over. In my opinion.
Yep,
it should be, as a snooker player, it should be the honey. It should be opportunities for everybody. It should be exactly what you think it is. I think the numbers, when you look at the qualifying structures and how many tables there are at qualifying venues and how hard it is to set up,
I just think there's a massive glaring beacon in the room. It's like the elephant in the room. Nobody wants to talk about it. There are too many players on the tour. Again, completely in my opinion. It's not that people don't deserve it. It's not that they don't deserve the opportunity. Of course they do. Everyone has worked hard and earned that opportunity. But there simply isn't the money in the game yet to spread from the top to the bottom. Whereas you say, there's a good group of guys down towards the end of the rankings who will have been struggling, certainly through this pandemic where they're not earning any money and there's no scope to earn any money at all. And I should think there's probably more than that, quite frankly. But certainly, as I say, when you hold that tour card in your hand, in my opinion, it should open up a whole new world. So my proposal was to cut the tour in half, 64 players, and everybody else goes on the Challenge Tour.
Qualify. Open it up.
Everyone goes on the Challenge Tour. And I was, nobody gets a tour card to the main tour without going through Challenge Tour. There are no tickets from anyone around the world, the Australians, the Africans, the Indians. Nobody anywhere gets a tour card to the main tour without going through Q School or Challenge Tour first. That's how I would have it. And when you get to that main tour, it should be no qualifiers. Everyone in at the first round, in every tournament, including the World Championships. I still think it's ridiculous that our biggest event, everyone doesn't start in round one. I don't understand it. I think I'm on my own, certainly as a top 16 player, to say that. I'm sure everyone wants to be seeded as far through as they possibly can. Yep. But, it just, for me, it doesn't make any sense. Now, I'm sure there are commercial reasons, and that's for WST to work out. And they are probably the overriding factors in all of this. But if it were up to me, it would be a 64-person tour, and everyone else would be on Challenge Tour. They'd both be better funded, more money, and I think it would be, a lot more brighter proposition for everybody.
Absolutely, totally agree. You're the only professional snooker player that's actually agreed with me on that, or I agree with you on that, whatever way you want to look at it, Shaun. For me, I look at the figures, I look at their earnings. If I see 40, 50 players, 40 odd players on the tour who are making nothing, not even covering their costs, then that for me, that's a problem. That's a problem. So it's not just about in terms of have the ability to go further. That tells me there's too many players on the tour. That tells me that perhaps maybe 60, there should be a professional 64 player format, and then perhaps another 128 players qualifying to reach that first round. Yeah. And there's other ways of doing that. There really isn't an awful lot where I don't think there's a lot wrong with the Challenge Tour. The Challenge Tour just needs to be slightly modified, maybe best of sevens. Maybe instead of the Order of Merit, extend the Order of Merit, bring it out, open it up. I mean, World Snooker could even bring in more revenue, that way. And so, I mean, if they open it up and play them through the years, and all of a sudden the amateur game, it's got a whole new meaning. It has a purpose. Because the players could possibly, as amateurs, they could possibly get involved in a ranking event. Yeah. So I think your views on that are quite similar, Fantastic. Right now, Shaun, we're going to finish off, okay, with one more thing. We've got to talk about the World Championship this year, okay? Yeah. It looks like it's going to be played behind closed doors. Yeah. So I'll just mention testing before I get your response to this. I'll just mention I think testing is going to be a part of this, COVID testing, maybe antibody testing as well, because they're rolling them out now in the next 2-3 weeks forever for people. And I think they should be looking at that from a professional sports perspective as well. So what are your views on that, for the World Championship played behind closed doors, and what areas do you think we should do? What things do you think we should do in order to make it safe
Well, I can tell you that for the newly announced Championship League that starts on June the 1st, testing is mandatory. So that's already in place and will be in place going forward. That was communicated to us earlier this week by World Snooker. The Championship League as well, which I'm not in, but a lot of the guys are, is going ahead. But as well, there's a hotel on site. Once you get there to play, you're not allowed out. You're in the hotel. You're kind of quarantined, but you're not quarantined. But once you're there till you finish playing. Everyone's tested, and obviously all measures are in place. I think each player is going to have their own, very cleaned and sanitized equipment to use. They'll all have their own rests, spiders and extensions. You won't be using the communal ones at the end of the tables anymore. Obviously, there'll be no handshaking or any contact of that kind. But snooker, snooker does lend itself to a life behind closed doors. It was always marketed as the ultimate TV sport. When Sir David Attenborough commissioned Pot Black back in the 60s, 70s, you were there. I wasn't there, but it was always the ideal colour TV sport. So I don't think there's any problem with that. It's of course, it goes without saying that we as players want as many people to be there as we could possibly get. The thoughts of walking out at the Crucible Theatre to nobody is horrendous. It's almost unthinkable. Rob Walker or whoever the MC is announces you out and you walk out and there's nobody there. It's going...
Could be a lot worse, I mean, there are, all right, you've got football games where you have maybe, anything between 30 and 50,000 people. In a snooker arena, you have several thousand people. But a lot of it really is Eurosport, ITV, BBC. So, I mean, you could say that it's not the end of the world.
No, well, I mean, snooker, snooker isn't driven. Obviously, the ticket sales income for World Snooker is significant, but it isn't the most significant part of their income. It's not like the turnstiles at Man United every week where there's 75,000 people through the gate, and that represents a significant part of their turnover. I don't think the ticket sales for these snooker events are that important to World Snooker. The actual numbers themselves, the crowds, the people, they make the game what it is. And without the fans, sport dies. That's a fact. But we are very lucky that our sport, as I say, lends itself to TV. It lends itself to streaming. It lends itself to these guidelines that are becoming our way for the foreseeable future. The most important factor of this, which I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, it has been talked about, but not by a lot, is that the World Championships has to be played. Because there are people on the ranking lists fighting for their tour spots, fighting for their tour cards, fighting for their livelihoods. Will they be pros next year or won't they? Will they be relegated to the Challenge Tour? Will that be on? Where's Q School? All of these things have to be answered. But the first thing has to happen is that the season has to be completed. The World Championships, in my opinion, has to go ahead. And if it has to go ahead behind closed doors in a very surreal environment, someone's going to pick that trophy up to nobody. But that's a very small price to pay, because the domino effect after that, the season completes, people are relegated, people are promoted, and off we go into the future. That has to happen for the game and everyone associated with it to move on. So, listen, it would never be my choice, but if we have to play behind closed doors, then so be it.
No. I'll tell you, look, obviously we're all getting through this pandemic very, very well. I mean, we're all trying to get through it, and like a lot of other professional sports people, I think we're going to come back to our sports. There's going to be a lot of top professional snooker players, a lot of snooker players in general are going to come back into the sport, And I think they're going to come back with a whole new type of enthusiasm. You know, we've survived this. We've got through this. We've probably lost some people, or we know of some people who have lost their lives to the virus. But I think this is just going to make us all stronger. You know, and
I think this will put. I think snooker's the same as a lot of other sports. If I'm completely, there's a lot of moaning goes on. You know, there's a lot of moaning about things that don't matter. Like golf must be the same. Tennis must be the same. Every working environment must be the same. But I think what we've all gone through in the last months and are still going through, I think will put all of that into perspective for everybody. When we do return to whatever normal looks like in the coming weeks and months, I think we'll go back to it with a renewed sense of perspective and a renewed appreciation for the freedoms to go to the snooker club or go to a snooker tournament or the cinema or whatever it might be that we've all had forever and that have been taken away from us. That's going to happen. It will pass. And we will all have learned a bit of humility and a bit of respect for these things and the frontline workers and everyone out there looking after us. And I think we'll have a newfound appreciation for things. But, you know, it's been horrible. I mean, personally, like, you know, I don't know anyone we haven't lost anyone in the family or know anyone who's gone to the virus. But there was, you know, one significant friend of my family. He would have known me since I was 2 or 3 years of age. He was a close friend to my parents. Our families were all quite tight. And he passed away from another illness very suddenly, unexpectedly. He used to come to a lot of my tournaments. We were very close. And he passed away 6 weeks ago now. And to think that that's happened, and I was never able to get to him, could never say goodbye, couldn't go to the funeral, as have lots of people been through that themselves. You know, 6 months ago, if someone had said that to us, it would have been unthinkable. So I think for us to have all gone through that, we all know somebody who's been affected by it, if not directly. When we all return to snooker or whatever our passion might be, I'd say we'll all go back with a new felt, you know, feeling of appreciation and perspective.
Sure, I can't think of a better way to end this. But thanks very much for joining us. And
You're welcome.
It's a pleasure to have you on, mate.
Thank you.
Covered lots of areas here. Boys, we've covered lots of areas. You know, we've got inside the head of Shaun Murphy, just like I promised you we would. We did.
It's a worrying place. It's a scary place.
You know, he's a little bit confused, just like the rest of us. We're all, you know, look what he's just done to his hair.
I know, look.
Get a haircut. Why don't you sit with the clippers and do what I do? What's wrong with this thing?
Oh, she loves you, yeah.
Anyway, look, Shaun, we'll give you a wee tinkle. I want to talk to you about something that's coming up in the coming months. Okay, don't be nothing to worry about. I'm putting you first this time. I'm not leaving you last. But thanks very much for joining us, mate. Okay?
Welcome. Thanks.
Take it easy. Stay safe.
Take care.
I'll speak to you soon. Okay, let's get rid of him before he comes back on again. Right, guys. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm getting a bit tired. This was only supposed to go on for about an hour with Shaun because he's got 2 wee children and, you know, they're driving him mad and he's driving them mad. And, you know, Lady Chanel is over there. She's trying, hey, darling, how are you? Are you all right? It's okay. So what we're going to do, guys, I'm going to organize something next week, through the week. I'm going to talk to some club owners, okay? I'm going to get a bunch of club owners on. We're going to pop on one-on-one, maybe about half a dozen of them, maybe a few more. And we're going to talk about where the game's going in terms of the clubs. And we're going to talk about ways that the clubs should promote themselves within the game. We're going to talk about pretty much what's going to happen when we get out of the lockdown. things get back to normal. And we're going to talk about getting young players back into the game again, something that we're missing from the game. I grew up in days where we didn't have mobile phones. You know, we only had 4 TV channels, no social media. So it was a fascinating thing for a wee boy at the age of 10 to walk into a working men's club and see this big green snooker table. What is that, Daddy? What does that thing do? How is that? That's a fascinating thing. Kids don't do that anymore. Kids walk into a snooker club with a mobile phone and, a video game, and they're looking at themselves and sending pictures of their boyfriends and their girlfriends. And, it's just all messed up. So you want to get these kids back into the clubs. We want to create, make snooker what it should be. So I'm going to get some club owners to join me through the week. Wednesday evening, I'm going to get in touch with a few, and then we're going to talk about some very important things. Thanks very much for joining us, lads. I will put up the posters for the next event, and I'm not sure who we're going to be speaking to next Sunday. I'm just waiting for them to come back. Terrible snooker players are terrible to get hold of. But anyway, stay safe.